Welcome to TV Anthology Reviews. I'm going to review and give a score to all 72 episodes of Monsters, and after that, review all episodes of Tales from the Dark Side. And after that, I'm going to do the Twilight Zone and Tales from the Crypt. For this video, I will cover the first 3 episodes of Monsters, which is The Feverman, Holly's House.
It's only honey, honey. From Dr. Jimmerman's bees.
And New York Honey. The show Monsters ran from 1988 to 1990 and had 3 seasons and 72 episodes. You can watch the entire first season for free on IMDb. Just go to imdb.com, search Monsters, and click Freebie. You can stream the entire first season with some ads. Or just buy the box set. Unfortunately, it is out of print and is a bit expensive. The show was produced by Mitchell Gallan and Robert Rubenstein. Mitchell Gallan was known for producing 40 episodes of Tales from the Dark Side, and Robert Rubenstein was a famous producer who worked a lot with George A. Romero. Rubenstein produced Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Pet Sematary, and both Creepshow movies, and Tales from the Dark Side. There was a big overlap in these shows. Many writers and actors appear in both shows, but I think Monsters is much better. It has better special effects and is more horror-themed and mature. Every episode of Monsters was required to feature a monster that usually showed up towards the end of the episode. The first episode of Monsters premiered on October 22nd, 1988. This was about 3 months after the series Tales from the Dark Side ended, and Monsters was to take over as the new anthology show. Alright, let's get to the first episode, The Feverman. The first episode of Monsters, The Feverman, premiered October 22nd, 1988. It was directed by Michael Gornick, who is most known for directing Creepshow 2, and written by Neil Marshall Stevens, who did a ton of B-horror movies before hitting it big in 2001, being one of the writers of the horror movie 13 Ghosts. The episode starts off gloomy and dreary, with a yellow tint to the visuals, exuding a low-budget look. Luckily, this was not an indicator for what other episodes would look like, as most other episodes had much better and brighter set design. We see a desperate father bringing his daughter to the house of the famed faith healer named the Feverman. His doctor is with him and is skeptical of the faith healer's powers. The rumor being this Feverman literally beats the disease out of his patients by fighting a monster that is keeping them sick using his secret crystals. Makes sense? We get our first look at the faith healer Feverman as he comes shuffling down the stairs looking like a disheveled Bill Paxton, drink in hand. Oh yeah, he's also a drunk. Like, the entire episode he is drunk. This becomes more annoying as the episode goes on, the Feverman constantly mumbling, groaning, and complaining, resembling nothing like the great healer he's supposed to be. The Feverman explains if he doesn't cure the fever, the Feverman and the patient both die. He tells them to go upstairs as he has some fighting to do. While upstairs, the skeptical and arrogant doctor gets impatient. He barges down to the basement to see what the Feverman is up to be greeted by him, wrestling a large woman in a greasy fat suit. They really went overboard on the grossness on this one. I mean, it's a monster, but definitely not one of my favorite ones. You can imagine how miserable it was for the actor to wear that suit. The Feverman loses the battle against the monster really quickly, but then hands off the torch to the reluctant, skeptical doctor, blaming him for interrupting his battle. The brave Feverman gives him some pearls of wisdom.
Just remember what I said. Charge high and pay high, and you'll die content.
Pours some brandy, then sends the doctor into the ring as the Feverman acts as his cornerman. You know, I'm starting to think this was his plan all along. With Feverman yelling from the sideline,
Mix it up! Mix it up!
channeling his inner Customato, the doctor is able to neck crank the monster Khabib style and submit the monster for a solid 10-9 round. I give this episode a 4 out of 10. The 2 sets are dreary, and the fight scenes are unintentionally hilarious. The writing is at least well thought out, as it makes sense in an upside-down horror movie logic kind of way. It's an average episode, and I think a bad way to kick off the series, especially since how much better the following episode, Holly's House, is. Tales from the Dark Side, the precursor to this series, kicked off with an episode that went wild with special effects and costumes. Monsters starts with a whimper, but quickly eclipses the Tales series. Alright, on to Holly's house. Thank God.
What's the house where the kids always show up? What's the house where we never have to grow up? What's the funniest house? What's the sunniest house? It's Holly.
I'm definitely putting that song on my iPod. Okay, so as you can see, Holly's House is a kid show featuring the star, Holly, Early Bird, and also Mike the Mailman, who is not to be confused with Steve from Blue's Clues, though he looks a lot like him. The episode is directed by Theodore Gershony, who also directed Silent Night, Bloody Night. We learn that the main character in the show, Holly, is controlled by a woman named Kathy. This is no normal kid in a costume. Holly is a robot. We then learn that Mike the Mailman has more than mail on the mind.
This is great. You know what else I think? I think we should do it.
We already did it, Lenny.
No, get married. I'm serious.
Needless to say, she rejects Mike the Mailman's offer for marriage. As the doll starts to move by itself, it makes you think, is this all Kathy's doing? Is it all in her mind, or is the doll really alive? Holly's House came out the same year and a few weeks earlier than the movie Child's Play, which debuted in theaters November 9th, 1988, making Chucky an instant icon in horror movies and kicking off a slew of killer doll, killer toys, and killer leprechaun movies all throughout the 90s. We then cut to the robot Holly being a current-day Madonna and throwing a fit.
You're trying to get rid of me. You had the camera on everybody but me in that scene. This is Holly's house. Look at the ratings, you idiot. Mr. Mike, it's Lenny Wiener, and he's a loser. I say we dump him.
Mr. Mike then goes poking around backstage and immediately regrets it, where he gets stabbed to death in a very effective scene. Holly then sets up a treasure hunt.
A treasure hunt with a very special prize. You've got to find it. It's somewhere in this room.
I know. In here.
You found it!
We see the insides of the robot as Kathy smashes it apart, cutting to a scene of her in a hospital bed. This sets up a perfect interpretive ending. Avoiding the cliche of it's just a dream story, it's open to interpretation whether she actually killed Mike the Mailman or if the robot Holly came alive and did it without Kathy controlling her. I like this episode a lot. Everyone hates the it's just a dream story, but this gets it right. Personally, I believe Kathy killed Mailman Mike and they put her in a mental hospital, but it just as easily could be she was crazy from the start and dreamed it. Or maybe Holly, the robot, really did kill Mailman Mike. Great story, 9 out of 10, which brings up the best question. Why didn't they kick off the series with this episode, not Feverman?
What were they thinking?
This has multiple detailed characters and more elaborate sets and feels like a shortened movie. The idea of a kids show with a killer robot would have complemented Child's Play perfectly. The low budget doesn't show as much either. The estimate is each episode of Monsters costs $200,000, but my guess is Feverman costs way less and Holly's House costs way more. They will do a few low-budget episodes, then save the money for an episode with a better script that they then spend the money on. Tales from the Dark Side did the same thing. Episode 2, Holly's House, is well worth the watch. Now, on to Episode 3, New York Honey, that's filled with New York accents, co-op living, and bees. Killer bees.
Music again? It's after midnight. We're living in a disco. Go up there, try to reason with them.
All right. Enough is enough. No more Mr. Nice Guy.
The episode starts with loud classical music annoying the couple Blake and Emerald. A regular Seinfeld episode occurs as they confront their upstairs neighbor to turn the music down. The character Blake is played by Louis J. Stadlin, and he chews scenery enough to make Bruce Campbell blush. And looks like Hank Azaria's evil twin. Your enjoyment of this episode is partly contingent on whether you find the character Jay Blake annoying or funny. Personally, I find his off-Broadway theatrics funny, and so over the top, I can't help but laugh.
You can turn off that damn stereo before I turn it off for you! Please, there's no need for bothers! Then turn it off!
Dr. Zimmerman then tells his downstairs neighbor, Jay Blake, the classical music makes the bees buzz, mate, bang each other, generating more honey for Dr. Zimmerman. These are pleasing words to Jay Blake's greedy ears, and he comes up with a plan after tasting the sweet nectar. He will take as much as he can and sell it, and pay back Dr. Zimmerman whenever he feels like it. This plan works, and Mr. Blake is happy as a hamster in a wheel and gets around to giving Dr. Zimmerman his money from the bee business, to be greeted at the door by a sultry temptress, giving off Anna Nicole Smith vibes. This girl is Dr. Zimmerman's new girlfriend, named Desiree. Jay Blake takes an instant liking to her, and I have no idea why, since he has a perfectly good wife at home. Now the bee puns start pouring in, and the chemistry between Desiree and Mr. Blake is beautiful.
Have a libation. Be comfortable. A toast to business. A bad joke. You had a bee there.
His wife comes home to see what every girl likes to see her man doing. Kissing another girl's feet. Seems like Mr. Blake has a bit of a foot fetish. Desiree quickly summons bees to kill Mr. Blake's wife. She also kills her old boyfriend, Dr. Zimmerman. Jay Blake doesn't seem to be bothered that his wife was killed. And then we get the reveal that Desiree was not some sweet innocent girl, but is instead the queen bee. The transformation is interesting to say the least. I like this episode a lot. I was going to give it a 6, but Jay Blake bumps it up to a 7. I really like how they added the character Desiree halfway through the episode, as you think it is going in one direction, and all of a sudden the femme fatale appears. It takes things up a notch. Stay tuned in 2 weeks where we cover 3 more episodes. Episode 4, The Vampire Hunter. Episode 5, My Zombie Lover. And Episode 6, Where's the Rest of Me? Featuring Meatloaf and me singing. Bye.